Some mockery lasts only a moment, but its echo can follow two lives for decades. In 1996, when 11-year-old Lewis Hamilton appeared on Blue Peter and told the world he would become a Formula One champion, Desmond Parker laughed the loudest. A black kid from council housing? In Formula One? That'll be the day? 29 years later, as Desmond sweeps debris from Silverstone Circuit after another Hamilton victory, that laughter haunts him still. But what neither man realizes is how their paths are connected by more than just a childhood dream and adult regret, through the life of a young doctor named Zara. This is the story of how the man who once laughed at Hamilton's dreams found redemption on the very track where those dreams came true. Desmond Parker pushed open the heavy wooden door of the Crown and Shield pub in Stevenage. The warm air hit him, smelling of beer and fried chips. It was Friday night in March 1996, and like every Friday, Desmond was meeting his mates after finishing work at his small garage. "Des, over here!" shouted Tommy from their usual corner table. Three men were already there, pints half empty in front of them. Desmond nodded, pointing to the bar to show he'd get a drink first. The bartender, Mick, already had his usual ready. "Hard day?" Mick asked, sliding the pint across. "The usual," Desmond said. "Fixed Mrs. Bentley's Fiesta again. Third time this month." He paid and carried his drink to the table. "About time," said Gary, the oldest of the group at 47. "We were about to start the important discussions without you." Desmond laughed and took his seat. At 35, he was proud of what he'd built. His garage was small but busy. He had 3 employees now. His wife, Sophia, was happy in their modest but comfortable house. Their daughter Zara, just turning 7, was doing well in school. Life wasn't fancy, but it was good. What important? "Discussions?" Desmond asked. "Whether West Ham has a chance this season? Because they don't." This started the usual football argument. Tommy was a devoted West Ham supporter and never gave up hope. The TV in the corner was playing, but no one was paying attention until Barry pointed. "Hey, it's that kids' show, Blue Peter," Barry said. "My daughter watches it." They glanced up, ready to ignore it, when the host announced they had a special guest. "This young man is already making waves in karting, and he has big dreams. Please, welcome 11-year-old Lewis Hamilton." A small black boy walked onto the set. He seemed confident, but a bit shy at the same time. The host asked him about his karting, and young Lewis answered politely. Then came the question that would stick in Desmond's mind for years. "And what's your ultimate dream, Lewis?" the host asked. The boy didn't hesitate. "I want to be a Formula One world champion," he said clearly. The table of men burst out laughing. "Did you hear that?" Gary wheezed. "F1 champion." "Kid's got a big imagination," Tommy said, shaking his head. Desmond laughed the loudest. "A black kid from the council houses in Stevenage? In Formula One? That'll be the day." Barry wiped his eyes. Someone should tell him to be realistic. Those racing families have millions. They start their kids when they're babies and have all the right connections. "His dad's a nobody, works on the railways or something," Desmond added. He knew the Hamiltons vaguely. Stevenage wasn't that big. "Living in council housing. Nice dream, kid, but dream smaller." On screen, Lewis was explaining how his father worked multiple jobs to support his karting, how he practiced whenever he could, how he believed he could make it if he just worked hard enough. "Poor kid," Desmond said, still chuckling. "Someone should tell him how the world really works." "Let him learn the hard way," Gary replied. "Everyone needs their dreams crushed eventually. Puts hair on your chest." They moved on to other topics, But Desmond glanced at the screen once more. The boy was now showing off a trophy he'd won. There was something in his eyes, a determination that was unusual in someone so young. For just a second, Desmond felt a twinge of something like guilt. Then Barry told a joke about his mother-in-law, and the moment passed. When Desmond got home that night, Zara, 12 years later, in October 2008, Desmond Parker stood in his garage and stared at the empty bays. No cars to fix, no customers calling, nothing but silence where there should have been the sounds of mechanics working, tools clanging, and engines starting. "It'll pick up soon," said Jimmy, his head mechanic and friend of 15 years. "Just a slow month." Desmond nodded, but they both knew it wasn't true. It hadn't been just a slow month. It had been 3 slow months, and it was getting worse. The news called it a global financial crisis. Big banks were failing. People were losing jobs. Desmond just knew that his customers weren't coming in anymore. "Mrs. Hadley called," Jimmy continued. "Said she'll have to put off fixing her brakes for now. Going to take the bus instead." Desmond sighed. That was happening more and more. People were putting off repairs or selling their cars altogether. Who could blame them? Food on the table came first. At home that evening, Desmond sat at the kitchen table with bills spread out in front of him. Sophia placed a cup of tea beside him and squeezed his shoulder. "That bad?" she asked. "Worse," he admitted. "If things don't change soon—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Sophia knew. Their daughter Zara, now 19, came into the kitchen. "Dad, can I have money for my university application fees? They're due next week." Desmond and Sophia exchanged glances. Zara was still determined to become a doctor. She'd worked hard in school, gotten good grades. She deserved her chance. "Of course, love," Desmond said, forcing a smile. "I'll transfer it tomorrow." After she left, Sophia whispered, "Can we afford it?" "I'll make it work," Desmond promised. "I always do." But for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure he could keep that promise. November brought more bad news. 2 more regular customers called to cancel appointments. Then the landlord raised the rent on the garage space. "You've got to let some of us go," Jimmy told him one rainy afternoon. "It's the only way to stay afloat." Desmond knew he was right, but these weren't just employees. They were friends. "Give me until the end of the month," he said. "Maybe things will turn around." They didn't. On the last day of November, Desmond called his 3 employees together. Jimmy, who'd been with him since the beginning. Raj, who was the best with electrical problems. And Peter, the youngest, who was still learning but showed real talent. "I can't keep all of you on," Desmond said, his voice rough. "I'm sorry." In the end, he kept Jimmy at reduced hours. Raj and Peter cleared out their tools the same day. Desmond promised to call them first when things got better. If things got better. December was cold and dark, both outside and in Desmond's mind. The garage was quiet now. Just him and Jimmy 3 days a week. Not enough work for even that. On Christmas morning, he watched Zara open her present, a second-hand laptop for university. She hugged him tight. "Thanks, Dad. It's perfect." Granat had cost much less than she thought. He'd found it at a pawn shop and fixed it up himself. The new year, 2009, brought no relief. By March, Jimmy was gone too, finding work at a larger garage across town. "You should apply there as well," Jimmy suggested. "They're looking for experienced mechanics." Desmond shook his head. "I can't give up my own place," he said. "It'll turn around." But in April, the bank called about missed loan payments. In May, the landlord gave him notice. By June, Parker's garage was no more. On the day he locked up for the last time, Desmond sat in his car and cried. 17 years he'd run that garage. 17 years of hard work gone in less than one. At home, things weren't much better. Sophia was working extra shifts at the supermarket, but it wasn't enough. Their savings were gone. The mortgage payment was late again. "We could sell the house," Sophia suggested one night. "Get something smaller." "And Zara's university?" Desmond asked. Sophia didn't answer. They both knew what that meant. Desmond found work at a chain auto repair shop. The pay was much less than he'd made running his own garage. The hours were longer. His boss was half his age and knew half as much about cars. But it was a job. Then, in August, while Desmond was at work, Lewis Hamilton won the Hungarian Grand Prix. The other mechanics were watching it on a small TV in the break room. "That Hamilton's something else," one said. "Can you believe he's from Stevenage? Just like you, Des." Desmond nodded, but didn't reply. He remembered that day in the pub, all those years ago, when he'd laughed at a little boy's dream. Now that E.D. Boy was on top of the world, while Desmond's world was falling apart. By November 2009, Desmond had lost his job at the chain shop. "Cutting back," they said. "Last one hired, first one fired." The job market was flooded with unemployed mechanics. There was nothing else out there. Their house went into foreclosure in February 2010. They had until April to move out. "I've been offered a job in Manchester," Sophia told him one night. "My sister says we can stay with her until we find a place." "What about Zara's university?" Desmond asked. "She can apply there instead," Sophia said. She might have to. Put it off a year. Work and save up." Desmond felt like he'd been punched. "No," he said. "She's worked too hard. We can't let her give up her dream." "What choice do we have?" Sophia asked, tears in her eyes. The answer came a week later. Zara got a letter. A scholarship. Not a full one, but enough to help. She could go to university in London. She could stay in student housing. It was the first piece of good news in a long time, but it changed everything. "I'm taking the job in Manchester," Sophia told him. "Come with me, Des." He looked around their half-packed house. "What about Zara? She'll be in London. She'll be in student housing. She'll be busy with her studies." "We can visit," Sophia said. "We have to think about survival now." Desmond knew she was right, but something in him couldn't leave. Not yet. Not like this. "I'll find something here," he said. "Give me a little more time." Sophia looked at him for a long moment. "I can't wait anymore, Des, I'm sorry." A month later, Desmond stood outside a tiny flat in the worst part of Stevenage. One room, shared bathroom down the hall. All he could afford. Sophia was in Manchester. Zara was preparing for university. And he was alone. That night, he turned on the small TV he'd kept from the house. The Formula One season was starting. Lewis Hamilton was being interviewed, talking about his hopes for another championship. Desmond turned it off. He couldn't bear to watch someone else's success story. Not now. Not when his own story had taken such a dark turn. Little did he know, things would get much worse before they got better. 5 years seemed to pass in a blur for Desmond. 5 years of temporary jobs that never lasted. 5 years of smaller and smaller flats until he couldn't afford even those. 5 years of watching his connection to Zara grow more distant with each passing month. By January 2015, Desmond Parker was homeless. 45 years old and sleeping in the Stevenage shelter when there was space. on friends' couches when they'd have him, and sometimes on the coldest nights in the train station until security kicked him out. It wasn't that he didn't try. He applied for every mechanic job in the area. He applied for jobs stocking shelves, cleaning offices, anything. But there was always someone younger, someone with fewer gaps in their work history, someone who didn't look quite so defeated. "You've got to leave Stevenage, mate," his old friend Tommy told him the last time he'd let Desmond sleep on his couch. "There's nothing for you here anymore." But Desmond couldn't leave. Zara was in her final year at university in London. She sometimes came back to visit her old friends in Stevenage. He couldn't risk missing a chance to see her, even if it was just a glimpse from across the street. They hadn't spoken in nearly 2 years. The last time she'd asked for money for textbooks. He'd had to say no. The shame of it burned in his stomach every day. One bitter February afternoon, Desmond was walking through town, trying to stay warm. The icy wind cut through his worn jacket. His feet were damp from the holes in his boots. He needed somewhere to get out of the cold. The Crown and Shield pub came into view, the same pub where he'd once laughed at Lewis Hamilton's dreams. Desmond hadn't been there in years. He checked his pocket, £3 and some change. Enough for one drink, which might earn him an hour of warmth. He pushed open the door, the familiar smell washing over him. But everything else had changed. New owners, new decor. No one recognized him, a blessing in disguise. Desmond ordered the cheapest beer and took it to a corner seat near the radiator. The warmth felt like heaven on his frozen limbs. The TV above the bar was showing sports. "News! Turn it up!" someone called as the Formula One segment came on. "They're talking about Hamilton!" The bartender raised the volume. Lewis Hamilton appeared on screen, standing beside his new Mercedes car for the 2015 season. He looked confident, successful. At 30 years old, he was already a 2-time world champion. After winning his second championship with Mercedes last year, Hamilton is looking to defend his title, the reporter said. Many are calling him one of the greatest drivers of his generation. The pub erupted in cheers. Everyone loved a local boy made good. "I used to laugh at that kid," Desmond muttered into his beer. No one heard him. No one was paying attention to the shabby man in the corner. "He makes it look so easy," a young man at the bar said. "Some people just have all the luck." Desmond almost laughed. Luck? He'd seen that Blue Peter interview. He'd read about Hamilton's father working multiple jobs to support his son's racing. Hamilton hadn't been lucky. He'd been determined. He'd had support. He'd worked for his success. Unlike me, Desmond thought bitterly. I gave up at the first real challenge. He finished his beer slowly, making it last. When the warmth of the pub could no longer justify his presence, he stepped back into the cold. Night was falling. The shelter would be full by now. Tommy had made it clear the couch wasn't available anymore. Desmond walked without direction, just trying to keep moving to stay warm. His feet carried him to an old railway bridge. Underneath, it was dry at least. He wasn't the first to have this idea. There were signs of others who had sheltered there. An empty bottle, some cardboard laid out as a makeshift bed, a burnt-out candle. Desmond sat with his back against the cold concrete, pulled his thin jacket tighter, and tried not to think about how far he had fallen. 5 years ago, he'd had a home, a family, a business. Now he had nothing, not even hope. The thought that had been circling his mind for months came back stronger than ever. What was the point of continuing? Who would even notice if he disappeared? Sophia had a new life in Manchester. He'd heard through Tommy that she was living with someone new, and Zara. Zara would be better off without the disappointment of a father who couldn't even help with her textbooks, who couldn't even keep a roof over his own head. Desmond pulled out his wallet, empty of money but still containing the one photo he'd kept all these years. Zara at her high school graduation, smiling proudly in her cap and gown. He'd been there that day, standing at the back, still with some dignity then, still with some hope. He traced her face with his finger. She'd be 24 now. Finishing medical school soon, maybe. He didn't even know for sure. What kind of father didn't know? The thought hit him like a physical blow. He'd failed at everything else, but this was the failure that hurt the most. He'd failed his daughter. Desmond's eyes burned with tears. He leaned his head back against the concrete and looked up at the underside of the bridge. So easy to just end it all, to stop the pain, the shame, the constant struggle. A train rumbled overhead, making the ground vibrate beneath him. For one dark moment, he thought about climbing up there, waiting for the next train. Then Zara's face flashed in his mind. Not from the photo, but how she might look now. Would she still have that determined expression she'd had as a child when she announced she would be a doctor? Had she made it? Was she happy? He would never know if he gave up now. Desmond tucked the photo carefully back into his wallet. Not tonight. He couldn't do that to her, even if she might never know. He pulled a piece of cardboard over to sit on, trying to insulate himself from the freezing ground. Tomorrow, he would try again. One more application. One more attempt to rebuild some small part of his life. As he drifted into an uneasy sleep, the wind howling around the bridge supports, Desmond dreamed of racing cars, of cheering crowds, of a small black boy from Stevenage telling the world he would be a champion. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel bitterness at the thought of Lewis Hamilton. Instead, he felt something else, a tiny spark of admiration. Hamilton had faced obstacles too. Different ones, but obstacles nonetheless, and he hadn't given up. Morning came, gray and drizzling. Desmond woke stiff and cold, his joints aching from the hard ground. But he was alive. He had made it through one more night. He stood slowly, painfully, and began walking toward town. The library opened at 9. It would be warm there, and they had computers for job searches. Maybe today would be different. Maybe today something would change. Little did Desmond know, change was coming. Not in the way he expected. Not in the way anyone could have predicted. But life, like a Formula One race, could take unexpected turns. And sometimes the most important turn came when you thought the race was already lost. The Stevenage Public Library was warm and quiet. Desmond sat at a computer in the corner, scrolling through job listings he'd already seen a dozen times. Nothing new, nothing promising, but at least it was dry here. Outside, February rain fell in sheets, turning the streets into rivers. Desmond's shoes were still soaked from his walk to the library, his socks squished with each small movement of his feet. 30 minutes left, sir, the librarian reminded him gently. She knew him by now. Most of the staff did. They were kind enough not to mention the way he used the bathroom sink to wash up, or how he sometimes nodded off in the reading. Chairs. Desmond nodded his thanks and clicked on a news site, just to pass the time. His eyes caught a headline. Lewis Hamilton to appear at London charity event. Without thinking, he clicked. The article explained that Hamilton would be speaking at a charity gala in London next month. The event would raise money for underprivileged youth interested in motorsports. Desmond stared at the photo of Hamilton. confident, successful, standing by his race car. Something stirred inside him. Not the old bitterness, but something new, something hot and raw. When his computer time was up, Desmond moved to a table. He pulled out an old notebook and a stubby pencil he'd found on the street. Before he knew what he was doing, he began to write. "Dear Lewis Hamilton," he wrote, then stopped. What was he doing? This was stupid. Hamilton would never see this letter. And even if he did, why would he care what some homeless man from his hometown thought? But the pencil moved again anyway. "You don't know me, but I know you. I was at the pub in Stevenage when you were on Blue Peter all those years ago. I was one of the men who laughed when you said you wanted to be a Formula One champion." I laughed. The loudest? Desmond paused, surprised at the words flowing from his pencil. This wasn't what he'd expected to write, but he continued. "I'm not writing to ask for money or help. I'm writing because I need to say this to someone, even if that someone never reads it. I'm angry. Not at you. At myself. At life. At whatever cruel joke makes some people rise while others fall." The words came faster now, spilling onto the page. "I had a garage once. I had a family. A daughter who wanted to be a doctor. Then 2008 happened. The crash. Not on a racetrack. In life. My crash. And unlike you drivers with your safety equipment and medical teams, there was no one to help me when I hit the wall." Desmond wrote for an hour, filling pages with his story, his anger, his regrets. He wrote about sleeping under bridges, about losing touch with Zara, about watching Hamilton win championships on pub TVs while his own life fell apart. He wasn't sure why he was writing it all. It just felt good to get it out. "I don't expect you to read this," he concluded. "I don't even plan to send it. But today, seeing your face, hearing about your charity work, I needed to write it down, to admit that I was wrong to laugh, and to say that even though my life is a mess, there's a small part of me that's glad you proved us all wrong." Desmond signed his name at the bottom, then closed the notebook. He felt drained but somehow lighter, like lancing a wound that had been festering for years. "Excuse me." Desmond looked up. A young man with kind eyes was standing by his table. He wore a lanyard with an ID card that read, "Homeless Outreach." "I'm Marcus," the man said. "Mind if I join you for a minute?" Desmond shrugged. He'd talked to outreach workers before. They meant well, but they couldn't perform miracles. Marcus sat down. "I noticed you've been writing for a while. Must be important." "Just getting some thoughts out," Desmond replied, closing the notebook more firmly. Marcus nodded. "Sometimes that helps." He glanced at the notebook. "I couldn't help noticing the name Lewis Hamilton. Are you a fan?" Desmond almost laughed. "Not exactly. Just someone from the same town." "Ah," Marcus said. "I'm actually here because we have a new program starting. Job training, specifically for sporting venues. Silverstone Circuit is one of our partners." "Silverstone," Desmond repeated. "The famous racetrack where the British Grand Prix was held. Where Lewis Hamilton raced every year." "Yes," Marcus continued. "They need people for all sorts of jobs. Maintenance, food service, security. We help people who are trying to rebuild their lives get the training and support they need to qualify for these positions." Desmond's first instinct was to dismiss it. Another program. Another false hope. But something made him hesitate. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. Marcus smiled. "Because you're writing about Formula One, and I'm recruiting for a Formula One venue. Seems like fate, doesn't it?" "I'm too old," Desmond said automatically. "No one wants to hire a homeless man in his 40s. This program is specifically designed for people who've faced challenges, Marcus explained. Age isn't a barrier. Neither is housing status. What matters is your willingness to commit to the training. Desmond looked down at his notebook, at the letter he'd just written. A letter about a boy who defied expectations. A letter about regret and lost chances. "What would I have to do?" he asked finally. "Come to an information session tomorrow. Hear the details, then decide," Marcus said, sliding a card across the table. Sometimes the things we resent most are the very things we need to face. After Marcus left, Desmond stared at the card for a long time. Silverstone Circuit, the home of British motorsport, the place where Lewis Hamilton raced every year. What if you could turn things around by working at the very place you resent? Marcus had asked. Desmond looked back at his letter, at the raw emotions he'd poured onto those pages. Something stirred inside him. Not hope exactly, but a flicker of something. Curiosity, perhaps. Or the simple human desire to see what might happen next. He carefully tore the pages from his notebook and folded them, tucking them into his jacket pocket. He wouldn't send the letter, but he would keep it as a reminder of where he'd been. And maybe, just maybe, as a first step toward where he might go. The library would be closing soon. Outside, the rain had stopped. A weak sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the wet pavement. Desmond picked up Marcus's card and put it in his pocket next to the letter. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow he would go to that information session. After all, what did he have to lose? The community center was busier than Desmond expected. About 20 people filled the small meeting room, most looking as down on their luck as he was. Some were younger, some older. All had that same hungry look in their eyes, people desperate for a change. Marcus stood at the front of the room beside a woman in a Silverstone Circuit polo shirt. Her name tag read Elaine Howard, Community Outreach Coordinator. "Welcome, everyone," Elaine began once the room quieted. "I'm here to tell you about the Back on Track program." Desmond sat in the back row, arms crossed. He'd almost not come. Last night had been rough. The shelter was full, so he'd slept in an alley, waking up every hour from the cold. Silverstone Circuit employs hundreds of people, Elaine continued. Not just during race weekends, but year-round. We need maintenance. Workers, groundskeepers, security staff, food service workers, and many other positions. She clicked through slides showing people working at the famous racetrack. The Back on Track program offers 3 months of training and support. You'll learn specific job skills, but also life skills. Everything from proper work attire to budgeting to communication. At the end, qualified participants will be offered jobs at Silverstone or other sporting venues. A man near the front raised his hand. "What's the catch?" Elaine smiled. "The catch is you have to be committed. This isn't easy. You'll need to be on time every day. You'll need to stay clean and sober. You'll need to follow through, even when it gets hard." She looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes. When she reached Desmond, he didn't look away. "We understand many of you have faced serious challenges: homelessness, addiction, job loss, mental health struggles. We're not looking for perfect people. We're looking for people who are ready to work hard for a second chance." After the presentation, people lined up to sign interest forms. Desmond hung back, uncertain. This wasn't just about a job. It was about Silverstone, the home of British motorsport. The place where Lewis Hamilton raced every year. Was he ready to face that? To work at the very place that would remind him of the dreams he'd mocked and the success he'd resented? "I was hoping you'd come," Marcus said, appearing beside him. "I'm not sure this is for me," Desmond admitted. "Because of Hamilton?" Marcus asked. Desmond looked at him, surprised. "How did you know?" "I saw enough of what you were writing yesterday," Marcus explained. "Look, sometimes the things that make us uncomfortable are exactly the things we need to face." Desmond thought about that, about the letter in his pocket, about Zara, who he hadn't spoken to in years, about the nights under bridges and in shelters. "The program includes temporary housing," Marcus added. "A place to stay while you train." That got Desmond's attention. A roof, a bed, regular meals. "When does it start?" he asked. "Monday. 4 days from now," Marcus said, "but you need to commit today. We have limited spots." Desmond took a deep breath. 4 days to the start of something new. Or 4 more days of the same life he'd been living. "What about my age?" he asked, a final hesitation. "I'm 45. No one wants to hire someone my age." "Experience matters at Silverstone," Marcus replied. "They need mature people who understand responsibility. Besides, you know cars, right? You used to have a garage." Desmond nodded slowly. He did know cars. That part of his life, at least, hadn't been a failure. "So what's it going to be?" Marcus asked. "Are you ready to get back on track?" The phrase, the name of the program, struck Desmond. Back on track, like a race car after a spin-out, like life after a crash. He thought of Zara again. If he had a job, a place to live, maybe he could reach out to her. Maybe it wasn't too late. "Where do I sign?" Desmond asked. The next 4 days passed in a blur. Desmond was given a bed at a transitional housing facility. He got a haircut, a shower, clean clothes from donations. He looked in the mirror and barely recognized himself with his beard trimmed and his hair cut short. On Monday morning, he joined 15 others, the accepted applicants from the information session, on a bus to Silverstone Circuit. As they approached the famous track, Desmond felt his stomach tighten. The last time he'd felt so nervous was the day he'd opened his garage 20 years earlier. The bus pulled through the gates, and there it was, the legendary circuit where the best drivers in the world competed, where Lewis Hamilton had won the British Grand Prix multiple times. "Welcome to Silverstone," said their guide as they stepped off the bus. "Welcome to your fresh start." Looking around at the massive facility, Desmond felt very small. What had he gotten himself into? Could he really do this? 3 months of training seemed like forever. But then he thought of the alternative, of going back to shelters and streets, of never seeing Zara again. As the group followed their guide toward the main building, Desmond touched the folded letter in his pocket. The letter he'd never send. The letter that had somehow led him here. Maybe this was where he was meant to be all along. "This place is massive," whispered Raj, one of the other program participants who had become Desmond's roommate at the transitional housing. "I had no idea it was so big." Desmond nodded in agreement. On TV, you only saw parts of the circuit, the track itself, the pit lane, maybe the paddock. But Silverstone was like a small city. Offices, garages, grandstands, hospitality areas, maintenance buildings, and acres of parking lots and grassy fields that would fill with campers and fans during race weekends. Their guide, a friendly man, named Keith, who managed the maintenance staff, led them through a side entrance into a large meeting room. "This is orientation week," Keith explained. "You'll learn about the different jobs, tour the facilities, and start some basic training. By Friday, we'll assign you to specific departments based on your skills and interests." Desmond tried to focus as various staff members explained the i.e. history of Silverstone, safety procedures, and the code of conduct. But his mind kept wandering to the track itself. Somewhere out there was the asphalt where Lewis Hamilton had raced, where he had won British Grand Prix titles, where crowds had cheered for the boy from Stevenage who had achieved his dream. After lunch in the staff cafeteria, the first proper lunch Desmond had enjoyed in months, Keith took them on a tour of the circuit. The full Silverstone Grand. Brick Circuit is 5.891 kilometers long, Keith explained as they walked along a service road that ran parallel to the track. It has 18 corners. During the Formula One race weekend, more than 400,000 fans visit over 3 days. They stopped at a viewing area overlooking the famous Copse Corner. "This is one of the fastest corners in Formula One," Keith said. The drivers take it at about 290 kilometers per hour. Desmond tried to imagine a car moving that fast. Tried to imagine the skill, the courage it took to drive at those speeds. In 2021, this is where Hamilton and Verstappen had their big crash, said one of the younger men in the group. "I watched it on TV. Verstappen went straight into the barrier there." He pointed to the spot. "That's right," Keith nodded. "A lot of history has been made on this track." They continued the tour, seeing the pit lane, the paddock area where teams set up during race weekends, and the enormous grandstands that were empty now but would be packed with fans in July when Formula One returned for the British Grand Prix. By Bod-Inter, late afternoon, Desmond's feet were aching. It had been a long time since he'd walked so much in one day, but it was a good kind of tired, the kind that came from doing something, not just from surviving another cold night. That evening, back at the transitional housing, Desmond sat on his bed while Raj chatted excitedly about the day. "I hope they put me in event setup," Raj was saying. "I'd love to be right there when the teams arrive." Desmond nodded, only half listening. He'd pulled out a small notepad, brand new, provided in their welcome pack, and was writing. "What about you?" Raj asked. "Which department are you hoping for?" Desmond considered the question. "Maintenance, maybe," he said finally. "I'm good with my hands, used to fix cars." "Oh, right. You mentioned you had a garage once," Raj remembered. "What happened?" Desmond hesitated. He'd kept to himself mostly, not sharing much of his story. But Raj had been kind, and maybe it was time to stop carrying everything alone. 2008 happened, Desmond said simply. "The financial crash. Lost my business, then my house, then my family." Raj nodded. "I lost my restaurant in 2020, COVID. Couldn't survive the lockdowns." They sat in silence for a moment, two men who understood loss. "But we're here now," Raj said finally. "New start." Desmond looked down at what he'd been writing. Not a letter this time, but the beginning of what might become one. "Dear Zara," it began. Then nothing else yet. He wasn't sure what to say to a daughter he hadn't spoken to in years. But it was a start. "Family?" Raj asked, nodding toward the notepad. "My daughter," Desmond confirmed. "She'd be 26 now. In London, last I heard." "You should call her," Raj suggested. "Tell her about this place." Desmond shook his head. "Not yet. When I've got something to show. When I've proven I can stick with it." Later that night, lying in a real bed, a luxury after so long, Desmond thought about the day, about Silverstone, about the track where Lewis Hamilton raced, about how strange life was, bringing him here of all places. As he drifted off to sleep, he made a promise to himself. He would work hard. He would complete the program. He would not waste this chance. The next morning came early. Desmond joined the others for breakfast at 6:30, then boarded the bus back to Silverstone. Today, they would shadow workers in different departments to get a feel for the various jobs. Desmond was assigned to follow Miguel, a maintenance supervisor who had worked at Silverstone for 15 years. "You'll see every inch of this place in this job," Miguel told him as they walked to the maintenance garage. From the VIP boxes to the drainage ditches. Miguel wasn't exaggerating. Throughout the day, they fixed a leaking pipe in an office bathroom, replaced light bulbs in a hospitality suite, cleared debris from a service road, and repainted lines in a staff parking area. "Everything has to be perfect," Miguel explained. "This is a world-class facility. Standards are high." By the end of the day, Desmond's hands were dirty, his back ached, and he felt more satisfied than he had in years. This was real work. Work he understood. Work that mattered. As they were finishing up, Miguel handed him a small card. "Staff quarters," he explained. "If you complete the program, if you get hired full-time, that's where you'll live, on-site, small but decent." Desmond looked at the photo on the card. A simple room, not unlike a hotel room. Bed, desk, bathroom. But it would be his, a place to call home. That night, he took out his notepad again. "Dear Zara," he wrote, "I'm working at Silverstone Circuit now, training for a job. I have a place to sleep and food to eat. I'm trying to do better." He didn't mail it. He wasn't ready yet, but he kept it in his pocket, next to the letter to Hamilton. 2 reminders of why he was here. 2 reasons to keep going. The months flew by faster than Desmond could have imagined. March turned to April, April to May, and suddenly it was June 2020. The world had changed in ways no one expected. All sporting events canceled or postponed, announced the news on the small TV in the staff break room. The 2020 Formula One season remains on hold due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Desmond had completed his 3-month training program and had been hired as a full-time maintenance worker at Silverstone. He had moved into the staff quarters, a small room, but his own space with a bed, bathroom, and small desk. He had a uniform with the Silverstone logo. He had a paycheck every month. He had colleagues who respected his work. What he didn't have was the Grand Prix. The race had been postponed, with no clear date for when it might happen. "They're talking about July," Miguel told him as they repaired a section of fencing. "No fans, though. Just the teams, officials, and essential workers." "Will that include us?" Desmond asked. Miguel nodded. "Maintenance is always essential. Someone has to keep the place running." The news came in June. The British Grand Prix would happen on July 31st, 2020. No spectators. Strict health protocols. Teams would operate in bubbles to minimize contact. "They're calling it the Behind Closed Doors Grand Prix," explained Keith at the staff meeting. "It'll be strange without fans, but it's better than no race at all." Tuesday Eve. July approached. Desmond worked longer hours. Everything had to be perfect, even without spectators. The track needed maintenance. Barriers needed checking. Facilities needed cleaning. And now there were new requirements: sanitization stations, testing areas, social distancing markers. "You're good at this," Keith told him one evening as they finished a long day. "You pay attention to details. That's important here." Desmond nodded, accepting the compliment. It felt good to be valued for his work, to be seen as reliable again, to be trusted. The night before the teams arrived, Desmond sat at his desk and took out his notepad. He'd filled many pages now with letters to Zara. Letters he still hadn't sent. "Dear Zara," he wrote, "tomorrow the Formula One teams arrive. Lewis Hamilton will be here with Mercedes. It's strange to think I'll be working at the same place where he's racing. Remember how I told you about seeing him on TV when he was just a kid? How I didn't believe he could make it? I was wrong about him. I've been wrong about a lot of things. He paused, thinking about how much had changed, about how close he'd come to giving up completely under that bridge in Stevenage, about how different his life was now, just 5 months later. I'm saving money, he continued writing. Not much, but some. I have a plan now. I want to reach out to you, but I want to have something to offer first. I want to show you I've changed. I hope you're well. I hope your studies went well. I hope someday you'll let me be part of your life again. He folded the letter and put it with the others in his drawer. One day, he promised himself. One day he would have the courage to send them. The next morning, Silverstone transformed. Team trucks arrived. Equipment was unloaded. The empty paddock came alive with activity. Though much less than a normal race weekend, Desmond was assigned to the pit lane area. His job was to keep it clean, check for hazards, and be available if maintenance was needed. It meant he would be close to the action, closer than he'd ever imagined. Remember, no approaching the team members, Keith reminded all staff. Stay distanced. Wear your mask. Do your job and try to be invisible. Desmond nodded. He understood. He was there to work, not to gawk or ask for autographs. The first practice session was scheduled for Friday morning. Desmond arrived early, making sure everything in his area was perfect. Then he stood back, near a fire extinguisher station, and waited. The sound came first, the roar of engines warming up in the garages. Then, one by one, the cars emerged onto the pit lane. Desmond's breath caught as the black Mercedes appeared. Lewis Hamilton's car, number 44. Throughout the practice session, Desmond did his job. He picked up debris. He checked safety equipment. He stayed alert for any issues. But he couldn't help watching in awe as the cars screamed around the track, taking corners at unbelievable speeds. During a quiet moment, when the cars were in the garages between runs, he found himself staring at the Mercedes pit area. There was Hamilton, in his race suit, talking with his engineers. The boy from Blue Peter had become a 6-time world champion. He had proven everyone wrong, including Desmond. As if sensing his gaze, Hamilton looked up. Their eyes met briefly, across the pit lane. Hamilton gave a small nod. The simple acknowledgement one working man gives another. Without thinking, Desmond nodded back. It was nothing, really. A moment that Hamilton would forget instantly. But for Desmond, it was more. It was a connection, however small, to someone who had achieved what everyone said was impossible. Someone from the same town as him. Someone who hadn't given up. Over the race weekend, Desmond worked longer hours than he'd ever worked at his garage. But it wasn't like work. It was exciting. Being part of something so big, so important, even in a small way, filled him with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. On Sunday, race day, he watched as Hamilton won the British Grand Prix for the 7th time, breaking records. As the Mercedes team celebrated in the pit lane, Desmond quietly cleaned up discarded tear-offs and rubber debris. "Quite something, isn't he?" said a voice beside him. It was Keith. Desmond nodded. "He's from my hometown, Stevenage. Same as me." "I see. No," Keith replied. "That's why I thought you'd be good for the pit lane assignment. Hometown pride and all that." Desmond looked at his supervisor, surprised. "You knew?" Keith smiled. "It was in your application. Former garage owner from Stevenage. When I saw that, I thought you might appreciate being here more than most." As Desmond finished his shift that evening, the teams were already packing up. The strange, spectatorless Grand Prix was over. Hamilton had won. Life went on. Back in his room, exhausted but content, Desmond took out his notepad again. "Dear Zara," he wrote, "I saw Lewis Hamilton race today. I was working in the pit lane. He looked at me once, just a nod, nothing more. But it made me think about dreams and how wrong I was to laugh at his, and how wrong I've been to give up on my own. My dream isn't to be a world champion. It's simpler than that. It's to be someone you can be proud of again. Someone I can be proud of. I think I'm starting to get there." For the first time since he'd started writing these letters, Desmond felt ready to send one. Not today, not yet, but soon. When the moment was right, he had something to say now. Something that mattered. A year passed. Desmond continued working at Silverstone, becoming one of the most reliable members of the maintenance team. He had been promoted to senior staff, with a small raise and more responsibilities. His life had a routine now, a stability he hadn't known in years. He still wrote letters to Zara, filling a drawer with his thoughts and hopes, but he hadn't sent any. Not yet. He was waiting for the right moment, the right words. July 2021 arrived, bringing with it another British Grand Prix. This time with fans, thousands of them filling the grandstands after the worst of the pandemic had passed. "It's going to be intense this year," Keith warned the staff during their briefing. "Hamilton and Verstappen are neck and neck in the championship. The rivalry is heating up. Expect a fight on the track." Desmond had been following the Formula One season closely now. He watched the races on his days off, learning the names of all the drivers, understanding the strategies and politics of the sport. He'd become a fan, something he would never have expected. And he found himself rooting for Hamilton. Not just because they were both from Stevenage, but because he admired the man's determination, his skill, his refusal to be limited by other people's expectations. Race day, July 18, 2021, dawned hot and clear. Desmond reported for duty at 5:01 a.m., hours before the crowds would arrive. His assignment was the same as last year, the pit lane and the area around Copse Corner, one of the fastest turns on the circuit. By the time the race started at 3:20 p.m., the atmosphere was electric. The grandstands were packed. The crowd roared as the cars lined up on the grid. Hamilton in his Mercedes was second, behind Verstappen in the Red Bull. Desmond stood at his post near Copse, watching on a small monitor as the 5 red lights went out and the race began. Hamilton got a good start, challenging Verstappen into the first corner. Then they were racing toward Desmond's position, toward Copse. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Hamilton tried to pass Verstappen on the inside of the corner. The cars touched. Suddenly, Verstappen's Red Bull was spinning, flying off the track, slamming into the barrier with sickening force. The sound of the impact reached Desmond a split second later, a crash that made his whole body tense. 51 G of force, nearly 180 miles per hour. "Emergency crew to Copse," crackled his radio. Desmond was already moving, rushing to the scene with fire extinguishers. The race was immediately red-flagged. Medical staff arrived seconds later. As they worked to help Verstappen and secure the area, Desmond could hear the crowd's reaction. Some cheering that Hamilton was okay, others booing, blaming him for the crash. "Back to your positions," his supervisor ordered once Verstappen had been helped from his car and taken to the medical center. "We need to repair the barrier before the race can restart." For the next half hour, Desmond worked with the crew to fix the damaged barriers. It was hard, fast-paced work. The whole world was watching, waiting for the race to resume. There was no room for mistakes. When the race finally restarted, Hamilton was given a 10-second penalty for causing the collision. Desmond watched on monitors as the British driver fought back from the penalty to pass Charles Leclerc in the closing laps at the very same Copse corner to win the race. The crowd erupted. Cheers mixed with boos. It was a controversial victory. As Hamilton took his victory lap, waving the British flag, Desmond could see the emotion on his face on the big screens around the track. After the race, as Desmond helped clean up the debris from Verstappen's crash, he overheard fans arguing nearby. "Hamilton did it on purpose," one said angrily. "He knew exactly what he was doing." "It was a racing incident," another countered. "They were both pushing the limits. Easy for him to take risks when he's not the one who ends up in the wall." The first fan shot back. Desmond thought about that as he picked up fragments of carbon fiber, about risk, about consequences, about judgment. Later that evening, as the teams packed up and the crowds departed, Desmond found himself back at the crash site. The barrier had been repaired, the debris cleared. There was no sign of the violent impact that had happened hours earlier, just like there was no sign on Desmond of the man who had once slept under bridges. The world moved on quickly from crashes, both on the track and in life. A security guard approached. "All clear here?" Desmond nodded. "All clear." As the guard walked away, Desmond noticed something in the grass just beyond the barrier. A small piece of red plastic with the Red Bull logo, missed during the cleanup. He picked it up, turning it over in his hand. A piece of Verstappen's car. A reminder of how quickly things could change, how thin the line was between success and disaster. He slipped the fragment into his pocket and headed back to his quarters. That night, he couldn't sleep. Images of the crash kept replaying in his mind. The sound of impact, the silence afterward, the way the crowd had booed Hamilton on the podium. He thought about how easily people judged without knowing the full story, how they'd booed a man who was just doing his job, pushing to the limit, taking risks to achieve his goals, how they'd called him reckless, dangerous. Desmond had been one of those people once, judging Hamilton for daring to dream, laughing at his ambitions, and later, resenting his success. He took out his notepad. "Dear Zara," he wrote, "I saw a crash today, a bad one. It made me think about how quickly life can change, how one moment you can be racing at the front, and the next you can be in the wall. I've hit a few walls myself over the years, but the thing about crashes, the thing no one tells you, is that they don't define you. What defines you is whether you get back in the car, whether you're willing to risk crashing again for the chance to finish the race. I'm ready to take that risk now. I'm ready to reach out to you, to face whatever comes next, even if it means crashing again." He looked at the words on the page. Then he took out his phone, a simple one he'd bought with his first paycheck, and found Zara's email address, saved from his last contact with her years ago. With shaking fingers, he typed a message. "Dear Zara, I hope this reaches you. I'm working at Silverstone Circuit now. I've been clean and stable for over a year. I would very much like to hear from you if you're willing." "Dad!" Before he could change his mind, he pressed send. Like a racing driver heading into a corner. There was no turning back now. Desmond checked his email every hour for the next 3 days. No response from Zara. He told himself it was fine. She needed time. Maybe she'd changed her email. Maybe the message had gone to spam. Maybe she wasn't ready. Life at Silverstone continued. After the excitement of the British Grand Prix, the circuit returned to its normal rhythm. There were other events, track days for car clubs, smaller racing series, testing sessions. 2 weeks after sending the email to Zara, Desmond was assigned to clean up after a Mercedes testing day. Lewis Hamilton had been at the track, working with engineers to improve the car for the upcoming Hungarian Grand Prix. The Mercedes team was packing up as Desmond and 2 other maintenance workers began tidying the pit area. They had to wait until the team left before doing a thorough cleanup. "They pay extra for these private testing days," Raj told Desmond as they waited. Raj had also completed the program and now worked full-time at Silverstone. "Big teams like Mercedes can afford it." Desmond nodded, watching as the engineers packed equipment into crates. Hamilton had already left, whisked away in a black car with tinted windows. Finally, the team gave them the all-clear to enter the garage area. Desmond began sweeping up, collecting discarded tear-offs, rubber bits, and other debris. As he moved, a stack of tire covers, he noticed something underneath, a small black notebook. He picked it up, intending to give it to one of the Mercedes staff still packing up nearby. Then he glanced at the cover. Written in neat lettering was a simple label: Silverstone Notes, LH, LH. Lewis Hamilton. Desmond froze. This was Hamilton's personal notebook. He opened the cover just to confirm, and there it was on the first page: Lewis Hamilton, Mercedes AMG F1. "Hey, Keith," he called to his supervisor. "The Mercedes guys are still here, right? I found something they'll want." But when he looked up, the last Mercedes van was pulling away. The team had finished, packing up and left while he'd been cleaning. "They're gone," Keith said, coming over. "What did you find?" Desmond held up the notebook. "Belongs to Hamilton. His track notes or something." Keith whistled softly. "Better put that somewhere safe. I'll call the team and let them know we have it. They'll probably send someone to collect it tomorrow." Desmond nodded and tucked the notebook carefully into his pocket. "I'll leave it in the office before I go." But as his shift continued, curiosity began to nag at him. This was Lewis Hamilton's personal racing notebook, the private thoughts and notes of a 7-time world champion. The insights of the boy from Stevenage who had proven everyone wrong. He knew he shouldn't look. It wasn't right. These were private notes, possibly containing sensitive information about the car or strategy. Yet when his shift ended and he returned to his quarters, the notebook was still in his pocket. He told himself he'd just forgotten to leave it in the office. He'd return it first thing tomorrow. Sitting on his bed, he placed the notebook on his desk. He wouldn't open it. He wouldn't. But then he thought of that day in the pub, all those years ago, how he'd laughed at a child's dream, how wrong he'd been. Maybe there was something in these pages that would help him understand how someone defied such odds, how someone kept believing when the world said no. Just a quick look, he told himself. Just the first page. He opened the notebook carefully. After the name page was a detailed diagram of the Silverstone circuit, with notes in small, precise handwriting around each corner. Braking points, gear selections, reference markers. Desmond turned the page. More technical notes. Tire temperatures. Car setup options. Things that meant little to him despite his mechanical background. He was about to close the book when he noticed a section at the back with different handwriting. Less technical, more personal. He turned to it. "Remember why you started," read one note. "Remember Stevenage. Remember when they laughed. Use it." Desmond's breath caught. It was like Hamilton was speaking directly to him across the years, across their different paths. Another page held more personal reflections. Bad days make the good days feel better. Each setback is set up for a comeback. Keep pushing. And another, they don't have to believe in you. You have to believe in you. Prove them wrong by succeeding, not by arguing. Desmond read through these pages, transfixed. This wasn't just a champion's technical notebook. It was his psychological playbook, his way of turning doubt into fuel, his method for using others' disbelief as motivation. The final page he read contained just one line: "Your past doesn't define your future, unless you let it." Desmond closed the notebook carefully and placed it back on his desk. He felt as if he'd glimpsed something precious. Not secret technical information, but the mindset of someone who had refused to be limited by circumstances or others' expectations. Hamilton remembered the mockery too. He remembered where he came from. But instead of being haunted by it, he used it. He transformed it into determination. That night, Desmond slept better than he had in years. In the morning, he took the notebook directly to the office. "I found this during cleanup yesterday," he told the circuit manager. "It belongs to Lewis Hamilton. Can you make sure it gets back to him?" The manager nodded. "Mercedes is sending someone this afternoon. I'll make sure they get it." As Desmond turned to leave, the manager added, "Did you look inside?" Desmond hesitated. Then he nodded. "Just to confirm who it belonged to. Nothing more." It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. The manager smiled. "I probably would have too. Not every day you get to see inside the mind of a champion." That afternoon, Desmond saw a Mercedes team member collect the notebook. The matter was closed, but the words he'd read stayed with him. Remember when they laughed? Use it! That evening, Desmond checked his email again. Still no response from Zara. But this time, instead of feeling disappointed, he felt determined. If Hamilton could use others' doubts as fuel, so could he. He would keep trying. He would prove himself. Not to silence the mockers, but to validate his own belief that he could change. That he could be better. His past didn't define his future, unless he let it. The next morning, Desmond was called to the circuit manager's office. His first thought was that he was in trouble for looking at the notebook. Maybe they had cameras in the garage. Maybe the Mercedes team had complained. "You wanted to see me?" he asked nervously, standing in the doorway. "Come in, Desmond," the manager said, and closed the door. Desmond did as he was told, his stomach tightening. He couldn't lose this job. It was everything to him now. "Mercedes called this morning," the manager continued, "about the notebook." Desmond swallowed hard. "I only looked at it to confirm who—" The manager held up a hand, stopping him. "They're not upset. Quite the opposite. They want to thank you for finding it and returning it promptly. Apparently, it contains important notes for the upcoming race." Relief washed over Desmond. "Oh, good. In fact," the manager continued, "they were so pleased that Mr. Hamilton himself wants to thank you personally. He'll be stopping by this afternoon between meetings. I've arranged for you to be available at 3 o'clock. Desmond stared in disbelief. "Lewis Hamilton wants to thank me? Personally?" The manager nodded. "That's what they said. Be at the main. Reception at 3. And Desmond," he added with a small smile, "maybe wear a fresh uniform." Desmond nodded, still stunned, and left the office. Lewis Hamilton wanted to meet him, to thank him. The boy from Stevenage who had become a champion wanted to speak to the man who had once laughed at his dreams. The irony wasn't lost on Desmond. At 2:30, freshly showered and in a clean uniform, Desmond arrived at the main reception area. He was far too early, but he couldn't risk being late. He sat in a chair, trying to calm his nerves, rehearsing what he might say. Should he mention that he was from Stevenage too? Would that seem like he was trying to claim some connection that didn't exist? Should he apologize for looking through the notebook? Or would that just make things awkward? At 5 minutes to 3, a sleek black car pulled up outside. Desmond watched through the glass doors as Lewis Hamilton stepped out, dressed casually, in jeans and a black Mercedes team shirt. He was shorter in person than Desmond had expected, but carried himself with quiet confidence. Desmond stood as Hamilton entered, accompanied by a team member who spoke briefly to the receptionist. Then Hamilton turned and approached him. "You must be Desmond," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Lewis. Thank you for finding my notebook and making sure it got back to me." Desmond shook his hand, trying to keep his own from trembling. "It was no problem, sir. Just doing my job," Hamilton smiled. "Still, I appreciate it. Those notes are important for Hungary next week." There was a moment of awkward silence. The team member had stepped away, giving them some privacy. Desmond took a deep breath. "I'm from Stevenage, too," he blurted out. "Originally, I mean." Hamilton looked at him with renewed interest. "Really? Which part?" "Bedwell," Desmond replied. "I had a garage there for years. Parker's Garage." Hamilton nodded. "I think I remember that place. On Wedgwood Way?" "That's right," Desmond said, surprised and pleased that Hamilton knew it. "Small world," Hamilton said. "What brought you to Silverstone?" Desmond hesitated. How much should he share? How honest should he be? "Life took some unexpected turns," he said finally. "Lost my business in 2008. Things went downhill for a while. This place gave me a second chance." Hamilton nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I know about unexpected turns," he said. "Not the same as yours, obviously, but I understand how quickly things can change, for better or worse." Desmond thought of the words in the notebook, about using setbacks as motivation, about proving people wrong through success. "I saw you on Blue Peter," Desmond admitted suddenly. "Back in '96, when you said you wanted to be a Formula One champion." Hamilton laughed. "That feels like a lifetime ago." "It does," Desmond agreed. "I didn't believe it was possible back then, for a kid from Stevenage. Shows what I knew." Hamilton studied him for a moment. "Most people didn't believe it was possible. That's what made it interesting." There was another silence, but more comfortable this time. "Well, I should let you get back to work," Hamilton said finally. "Thanks again for the notebook." Desmond nodded. "Of course." As Hamilton turned to leave, he paused and looked back. "You know, Desmond, it's never too late to chase what matters to you." And then he was gone, back into the black car with his team member, off to whatever next appointment awaited a world champion. Desmond stood there for a long moment, replaying Hamilton's words. It's never too late to chase what matters to you. What more mattered to him? Zara, reconnecting with his daughter, showing her he had changed. Back in his quarters that evening, Desmond checked his email again. Still nothing from Zara. It had been over 2 weeks since he'd sent his message. Perhaps she really had changed her email, or perhaps she wasn't ready to respond. He opened his laptop, another purchase from his Silverstone paychecks, and began searching. Social media sites, professional directories, anything that might help him find current information about Zara Parker. After an hour of searching, he found her on a professional networking site. Dr. Zara Parker. She had done it. She had become a doctor, just as she'd dreamed as a little girl, drawing at the kitchen table. The profile listed her as working at a hospital in Birmingham. There was a contact email, different from the one he'd used. Desmond's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Should he try again? Risk another rejection? Or worse, continued silence? Hamilton's words echoed in his mind. It's never too late to chase what matters to you. He began typing a new message. Dear Zara, I don't know if my previous email reached you. I'm working at Silverstone Circuit now. I've been stable for over a year. Today I met Lewis Hamilton. He's from Stevenage, too, as you might know. He said something that made me think of you. It's never too late to chase what matters to you. You matter to me, Zara, more than anything. I understand if you're not ready to respond, but I wanted you to know that I'm still here, still trying to be someone you could be proud of. Dad. He read it over twice, then pressed send. Whether or not she responded, he would keep moving forward, keep proving himself, keep rebuilding his life. Because his past didn't define his future, unless he let it. Days passed with no response from Zara. Desmond tried not to check his email constantly. He focused on his work, taking on extra shifts, volunteering for the more difficult maintenance tasks that others avoided. You're going to wear yourself out, Raj told him one evening as they finished a 12-hour day repairing drainage systems along the track. You've been pushing non-stop for weeks. Desmond shrugged. Keeps my mind busy. Waiting to hear from your daughter? Raj asked. Desmond had shared parts of his story with his friend over the past year. Desmond nodded. Sent another email. Found her new address. Still nothing. Give her time, Raj advised. It's a lot to process. A week later, Desmond was eating lunch in the staff cafeteria when his phone buzzed. A new email. His heart jumped when he saw the address, Dr. Z. Parker. His hands trembled as he opened it. The message was brief. Dad, I got your emails. Both of them. I've been thinking about how to respond. I'm not ready to meet yet. I need more time. But I'm willing to exchange emails for now, Zara. Desmond read it 3 times. She had responded. She wasn't ready to see him, but she was willing to communicate. It was more than he had dared hope for. He typed his reply carefully. Dear Zara, thank you for responding. I understand completely that you need time. I'm grateful for any communication you're comfortable with. I'd love to hear about your life, your work. I'm so proud that you achieved your dream of becoming a doctor. Dad, he hesitated before sending it. Was it too much? Not enough? He'd been absent from her life for so long. How did you rebuild a relationship through emails? But he pressed send anyway. It was a start. Over the next few weeks, they exchanged cautious messages. Zara told him about her work at the hospital in Birmingham, where she was completing her residency in pediatrics. Desmond shared stories about Silverstone, about the cars, the races, the behind-the-scenes work that kept the circuit running. In his 3rd email, he wrote about meeting Lewis Hamilton. Remember how you used to watch Formula One with me when you were little? I actually met Lewis Hamilton recently. He came to thank me for finding his notebook. We talked about both being from Stevenage. He even remembered my old garage. Zara's reply came the next day. You met Lewis Hamilton? For real? That's hard to believe. No offense, but it seems like quite a coincidence that you'd be working where he races and meet him personally. Desmond felt a sting of hurt at her skepticism, but he understood. From her perspective, he was the father who had disappeared from her life, the man who had lost everything and let his family down. Why would she believe he was now rubbing shoulders with world champions? I know it sounds unlikely, he wrote back. I only spoke with him for a few minutes. I found his notebook after a testing session and returned it. He came to say, thank you. It wasn't a big deal to him, but it meant a lot to me. He said something I keep thinking about. It's never too late to chase what matters to you. You matter to me, Zara. I know I have a lot to make up for. Days passed without a response. Had he pushed too hard? Said too much? He tried to focus on work, but found himself constantly checking his phone. Finally, after a week, a new message arrived. I've been thinking about what you said, about it never being too late. I want to believe that's true. I want to believe you've changed. But I've been disappointed before. When Mom and I needed you most, you weren't there. I know the financial crash hit you hard. I know you lost the garage, but you chose to stay behind when Mom went to Manchester. You chose to disappear. I looked for you, you know? During my first year at university, I went back to Stevenage during breaks, asked around. No one knew where you were. Or if they did, they didn't tell me. I need to know why. Why did you give up? Why did you cut us off? Why should I believe things would be different now? Desmond read her words with tears in his eyes. She had looked for him. While he was sleeping under bridges, in shelters, on friends' couches, she had been looking for him. He typed his response with painful honesty. I was ashamed, Zara. I couldn't face you or your mother after losing everything. I thought you'd be better off without me dragging you down. I was wrong. It was the biggest mistake of my life. Pride and shame are terrible reasons to abandon the people you love. I can't change what I did. I can only try to be better now. He sent it, then immediately started a new message. I understand if that's not enough. If you need more time or decide not to continue contacting me, I'll respect your decision. But I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. Not for one day. Even at my lowest, I carried your picture. I thought of you. I just didn't believe I deserved to be in your life anymore. I was wrong about that too. 2 days later, Zara replied, "Thank you for being honest. I need time to process all this, but I'd like to keep emailing for now." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a reunion. But it was a door left slightly open, and Desmond was grateful for that small opening. As summer turned to autumn, their emails became more regular, less cautious. Zara shared stories from the hospital, the children she treated, the challenges of her work. Desmond told her about life at Silverstone, about the friends he'd made, about his promotion to team leader in the maintenance department. In October, he took a risk. "The Formula One season is ending soon," he wrote. "The last race is in Abu Dhabi in December. But before that, there's a special event happening at Silverstone. Some demonstrations, a charity function. I could get you a pass if you wanted to come. No pressure, just an offer." 3 days passed with no response. Desmond told himself it was too soon. He had pushed too hard. He should have waited. Then, on the 4th day, "What date is the event?" His heart pounded as he replied, giving her the details. Was she considering it? Actually considering coming to Silverstone? Seeing him in person after all these years? Her response came that evening. "I'm on shift that weekend. I can't make it. I'm sorry." Disappointment washed over him. But then he read the rest of her message. "But I have a weekend off in January. If there's something happening then, maybe we could meet. Somewhere neutral, not at Silverstone. Maybe a cafe in Birmingham?" Desmond read the words again and again. She was offering to meet him, in person, face to face, after nearly 5 years without seeing each other. January would be perfect, he wrote back, trying to contain his excitement. "Just let me know when and where. I'll be there." That night, he couldn't sleep. The prospect of seeing Zara again filled him with both joy and terror. What would she see when she looked at him? The father she remembered? The failure he had become? Or the man he was trying to be now? He thought about what Hamilton had said, about it never being too late, about chasing what mattered. Zara mattered. Being a father she could be proud of mattered. Even if their reunion was awkward or difficult, even if forgiveness was slow in coming, he would keep trying, keep working, keep proving himself. Because some things were worth any risk, any wait, any effort. The chance to be part of his daughter's life again was one of those things. December arrived, bringing cold winds to Silverstone and the end of another Formula One season. Lewis Hamilton had narrowly missed winning the championship, finishing second to Max Verstappen after a controversial final race in Abu Dhabi. Desmond followed it all closely now, genuinely interested in the sport that had once been just a bitter reminder of someone else's success. He shared his thoughts with Zara in their regular emails, and she sometimes responded with her own opinions about the races. Their planned meeting in January still loomed ahead, both exciting and terrifying. Desmond had already requested the weekend off, though it was still weeks away. "Parker," Keith called, hurrying across the maintenance garage one morning. "Got a special assignment for you." Desmond looked up from the equipment he was inspecting. "What's up?" "You've been promoted," Keith said with a grin. "Well, temporary promotion. We need someone to supervise the preparation for a special event in January." "What kind of event?" Desmond asked. "Lewis Hamilton is hosting a day for kids from Stevenage and similar towns," Keith explained. "Underprivileged kids, kids from council, housing, kids who wouldn't normally get exposure to motorsport. They'll tour the facility, learn about different careers in racing, and meet Hamilton himself." Desmond stared at his supervisor. "Hamilton is doing this? For kids from Stevenage?" Keith nodded. "It's part of his foundation work. Usually these events happen at other venues, but he specifically requested Silverstone for this one. Said something about bringing it back to where his journey really started." "And you want me to supervise the preparation?" Desmond asked. "You're from Stevenage too, right?" "Seemed fitting," Keith replied. "Plus, you're our best team leader. I need someone who'll make sure everything is perfect." Desmond thought about kids like Lewis had been, coming to Silverstone, seeing possibilities they might never have imagined otherwise. Kids from backgrounds like his own, kids who might be told their dreams were too big, just as Hamilton had been. "I'd be honored," he said. The assignment consumed Desmond's working hours for the next few weeks. Every detail had to be perfect, from the tour route to the demonstration areas to the catering for the children's lunch. The event would host 50 kids, ages 10 to 15, all from backgrounds similar to Hamilton's own childhood. "We need the classroom set up for the career presentations." Desmond instructed his team. "Make sure there are enough chairs, the projector works, everything spotless." He was checking the pit lane area, making notes about what needed cleaning and what safety measures to implement when he heard someone enter behind him. "Looking good," said a familiar voice. "I think the kids will be impressed." Desmond turned to find Lewis Hamilton standing there, wearing casual clothes rather than racing gear. "Mr. Hamilton," Desmond said, surprised. "I didn't know you were visiting. Today?" "Just a quick stop to check on the preparations," Hamilton explained. "And please, call me Lewis. We've met before, right? You found my notebook last summer." "That's right," Desmond confirmed, pleased that Hamilton remembered him. "I'm supervising the setup for your event." "Keith mentioned you're from Stevenage, too," Hamilton said. "That's great. These kids need to see people from backgrounds like theirs succeeding in all kinds of roles." Desmond nodded. "It's a wonderful thing you're doing for them." "I just want them to see possibilities," Hamilton said. "To know that their dreams matter, no matter what anyone else says." There was a moment of quiet as Desmond considered those words. Hamilton seemed to be rehearsing something in his mind, looking out at the empty pit lane thoughtfully. "I'm going to tell them about how people laughed when I said I wanted to be a Formula One driver," Hamilton said finally. "How I was told a kid from council housing couldn't make it in this sport. How I had to work twice as hard just to get noticed." Desmond felt a chill run through him. Those words, they were almost exactly what he had said back in 1996, watching that Blue Peter interview in the pub. "I want them to understand that other people's doubts don't define their potential," Hamilton continued. "That where you come from doesn't determine where you can go." Desmond nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The irony of the moment wasn't lost on him. Standing here with the very man whose dreams he had once mocked, now helping to create an event to inspire children to believe in those same kinds of dreams. "I should let you get back to work," Hamilton said, "but thanks for what you're doing here. It matters." As Hamilton turned to leave, something compelled Desmond to speak. "I was one of them," he said suddenly. Hamilton paused, looking back. "One of who?" "One of the people who laughed at you," Desmond admitted, his heart pounding. "In 1996, when you were on Blue Peter. I was at the pub in Stevenage. I laughed the loudest when you said you wanted to be a Formula One champion." He expected to see anger or disappointment on Hamilton's face. Instead, there was just thoughtful curiosity. "That was a long time ago," Hamilton said finally. "It was," Desmond agreed, "but I've never forgotten it, especially now, seeing everything you've achieved. I was wrong. So wrong." Hamilton studied him for a long moment. Then he asked a question that changed everything. "Aren't you Zara Parker's father?" The words hit Desmond like a physical blow. "How do you know my daughter?" Hamilton's expression shifted to one of surprise. "You're Dr. Parker's father. From Birmingham?" "Yes," Desmond confirmed, confused. "How do you know her?" "She's part of my foundation's scholarship program," Hamilton explained. "Has been for the past 2 years. We support students from families affected by the 2008 financial crisis. I've met her at several events." Desmond stared at him, trying to process this information. "Zara is in your scholarship program? She never mentioned?" "She might not have known I was personally involved," Hamilton said. "The foundation handles most of the interactions. I just meet the scholars a few times a year." Desmond couldn't believe what he was hearing. All this time, while he had been working at Silverstone, rebuilding his life, his daughter had been receiving support from Lewis Hamilton's foundation. The man whose dreams he had once mocked had been helping his daughter achieve her own dreams. "I had no idea," Desmond said, finally. "We've been separated for some years. We're just starting to reconnect." Hamilton nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Life takes unexpected turns. For all of us." They stood in silence for a moment, both processing this strange connection that neither had known existed until now. "Would you like me to mention to her that I met you?" Hamilton asked. "That you're working here?" Desmond thought about it, about the meeting they had planned for January, about how much he wanted that reunion to work. "No," he decided. "We're meeting next month. I'd rather tell her myself, if that's okay." Hamilton nodded. "Of course." He checked his watch. "I need to go." "But, Desmond?" "Yes?" "Sometimes the most meaningful victories aren't the ones that come with trophies," Hamilton said. "Remember that when you see your daughter." As Hamilton walked away, Desmond stood frozen in place, overwhelmed by what he had just learned. The world suddenly seemed smaller, more connected than he had ever imagined. The man who had once laughed at Hamilton's dreams now helped prepare events for his foundation. And his daughter, unknown to both of them, had been receiving support. From that same foundation, life really did take unexpected turns. Just like a Formula One race, just when you thought you knew the track, everything could change. The day of Hamilton's special event arrived on a bright January morning. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, making Silverstone look like something from a postcard. Desmond had been at the circuit since dawn, making final preparations, checking every detail one last time. By 9 o'clock, buses began arriving, bringing excited children from Stevenage and other similar towns. Desmond watched from a distance as they poured out, eyes wide with wonder as they got their first glimpse of the famous racetrack. "Everything ready?" Keith asked, joining him. Desmond nodded. "All set." "Good. Lewis just arrived. He wants to check in with you before things get started." Desmond found Hamilton in a small meeting room, reviewing his notes for the day. He looked up as Desmond entered. "Morning," Hamilton said with a smile. "How are we looking?" "Everything's ready," Desmond confirmed. "The kids are just arriving." Hamilton nodded. "Thanks for all your work on this. It means a lot." There was a pause, both men thinking about their last conversation, about the connection they had discovered. "Have you spoken with your daughter?" Hamilton asked finally. "Not yet," Desmond replied. "We're meeting tomorrow, in Birmingham." "Good luck," Hamilton said sincerely. "Family is what matters most in the end." The day unfolded perfectly. The children toured the facility, learned about different careers in motorsport, watched demonstrations, and had lunch in the same cafeteria where Formula One teams ate during race weekends. Their excitement was infectious, their questions endless. In Seatington, the afternoon, they gathered in the main hall for Hamilton's presentation. Desmond stood at the back, watching as the seven-time world champion spoke to the children about his journey from council housing in Stevenage to the pinnacle of motorsport. "People told me it was impossible," Hamilton said. "They laughed when I said what I wanted to do. They said a kid like me couldn't make it in Formula One." Desmond felt those words deep in his chest. He had been one of those people, one of those voices telling a child his dreams were too big. "But here's what I learned," Hamilton continued. "Other people's doubts only have power if you believe them. Your background doesn't define your future. Your determination does." The children listened, rapt with attention. Desmond could see the hope in their faces, the possibility taking root. For some of them, this day might be the moment they started believing in themselves, just as Hamilton had all those years ago, despite the laughter. After the presentation, as the children were preparing to leave, Desmond supervised the cleanup. He was checking the main hall one last time when Hamilton approached. "I wanted to give you something," Hamilton said, holding out a small envelope. "For tomorrow." Desmond took it, puzzled. "What is it?" "Just a note for Zara," Hamilton explained, "telling her what a good job you've done here today. Sometimes it helps to have someone else's perspective." Desmond was touched by the gesture. "Thank you. I don't know what to say." "Just tell her I said hello," Hamilton replied, "and that her father is helping create opportunities for kids just like I once was." That night, in his small room at the staff quarters, Desmond couldn't sleep. Tomorrow he would see Zara for the first time in nearly 5 years. What would he say? How would she look? Would she see the changes in him, or only remember the failures? The next morning, he took the train to Birmingham, the envelope from Hamilton in his pocket, along with the letter he'd written to Zara all those months ago. He had decided to give her both, one from the past, one from the present. Together, they told the story of his journey. The cafe she had chosen was small and quiet. Desmond arrived 30 minutes early, too nervous to sit. He paced outside, checking his watch every few minutes. At exactly noon, a young woman approached. Her hair was shorter than he remembered, her face more mature. But her eyes were the same. Zara's eyes, looking at him with a mixture of caution and hope. "Dad," she said simply. "Zara," he replied, his voice cracking. "Thank you for coming." They went inside, ordered coffee, sat across from each other at a small table. The awkwardness was palpable. 5 years of absence stretched between them like a vast ocean. "You look well," Desmond said finally. "A doctor now, just like you always wanted." She nodded. "And you? Silverstone seems to be good for you." "It has been," he agreed. "It gave me purpose again, structure, a chance to rebuild." They talked cautiously at first, then more freely. About her work at the hospital, about his job at the circuit, small steps across that ocean of separation. Finally, Desmond took a deep breath. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I just discovered recently." He told her about Hamilton's event, about their conversation, about the foundation that had been supporting her education. Zara's eyes widened. "You're telling me you work at Silverstone, and Lewis Hamilton's foundation has been supporting my scholarship, and you just happened to meet him and find out about this connection?" "I know it sounds unbelievable," Desmond said. "But it's true." He handed her the envelope Hamilton had given him. She opened it slowly, read the note inside. Her expression softened. "He says you've been doing important work," she said quietly. "That you're helping create opportunities for kids from backgrounds like his, like ours." Desmond nodded. "I'm trying to be better, to do better." Then he took out the old letter, the one he'd written in the library all those months ago. "I wrote this when I was still homeless, before Silverstone, before everything changed. I never sent it. But I want you to have it now." Zara took it hesitantly. "What is it?" "The beginning," Desmond said simply. "The moment I started to face the truth about myself." As she read, Desmond watched her face, saw the moment her eyes filled with tears, saw the slight trembling of her hands. When she finished, she looked up at him. "You wrote this about Hamilton, about laughing at his dreams." "I did," Desmond confirmed. "And then, by some strange twist of fate, I ended up working where he races. And you ended up being supported by his foundation. Neither of us knowing about the connection until now." Zara shook her head in disbelief. "It's like life is giving us a second chance?" Desmond suggested. "Like we're all connected in ways we don't understand?" She didn't answer right away. Then, slowly, she reached across the table and took his hand. "I'm not ready to forgive everything," she said honestly. "There's a lot of hurt still, a lot of questions. But I think I'd like to try to understand. To start again, somehow." As they sat there, hands connected across the table, Desmond realized that maybe this was what Hamilton had meant. That sometimes the most meaningful victories weren't the ones that came with trophies. Sometimes they were quiet moments in cafes, with tentative forgiveness and the fragile beginning of healing. The man who had once laughed at Hamilton's dreams now understood something the champion had always known, that the real finish line isn't fame or fortune or even success. It's finding your way back to what matters most, no matter how many crashes try to keep you from the track. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring narratives like this one. Each like and subscription helps us create more content that celebrates resilience and the power of transformation. Don't forget to share this video with friends and family who might need a reminder that it's never too late to change your life. Together, we can spread kindness and awareness through the simple act of sharing stories that matter. Until next time, remember that life, like racing, isn't about avoiding crashes. It's about how you find your way back to the track.